What's going on, everyone? We have a new episode here. Super excited to have this guest on. Andrew, can you start by kind of introducing yourself to the world and let people know who you are?
Sure. My name is Andrew Begin. I work at Galoy. We build open source Bitcoin banking infrastructure. Also, the developers and maintainers of the Blink wallet, used to be called Bitcoin Beach Wallet. I've been in Bitcoin space for a few years now. Fell hard. We can get into some of the background there. But yeah, I live in New England. Also, the founder of the Rhode Island Bitcoin Meetup. And I try and make it up to Boston as well for some meetups. But yeah, really excited. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm really excited to talk to you today, Andrew. And of course, I have to ask you, like, how did you get started in this space? Because you've done so many things in such a short amount of time that I think a lot of people might just think that you've been in this industry for like a decade or something. So I've always been curious to know, like, how did you get started? What was your humble beginnings, your rabbit hole story, the moment that you realized Bitcoin was like this paradigm shifting technology that would change the world?
For sure. Yeah, it's funny. A decade ago, or a decade or more ago, I remember being on like Slashdot and hearing about this guy buying pizzas with this weird thing called Bitcoin. And at the time, my boss was, joking about it. He was a tech guy. I think he got a little bit, and I just forgot about it for a decade. And so, a few years back, I had a buddy, Ugia, who he started sending videos in our group chat with friends, right? And a couple of the friends, were like, yeah, kind of ignore it, whatever. But it was, yeah, Saifedean, Andreas, a lot of these videos. And once I started, reading, I mean, when the Price of Tomorrow came out too, that kind of like really had a significant impact on me. I was kind of on the journey. Breed Love and Sailor, like there was many different pieces which kind of started kicking me into the rabbit hole a little. And yeah, it was really early where I had a baby daughter, like a newborn at the time, and so I had a little bit of extra time on my hands, meaning like I was watching her. I was like had a one ear pod in, and I was just like 40 hours a week on top of my day job. I was just like binging on Bitcoin content. As a way of background, I actually come from the digital marketing and advertising world. 15 years experience prior to that, and so a lot of what I had done was in selling things, right? Marketing things. And, one of the issues in that space is a lot of times you're supporting kind of the consumerism, all like the big techs, the big healthcares and all this stuff. And, the digital, the personalization, like, abusing analytics and things like this. And you're just like, man, like this just doesn't feel right. Right. Like I'm getting paid and to use my skills to do something that is, I don't know, it doesn't align with me as well as I wish it would. So when I found Bitcoin and I realized that the incentive alignment is like, I don't have to trust other people. I don't have to, I can be actually adversarial against other people and it just improves the system. I was like, this is mind blowing. Right. And then I continued to learn about other properties of Bitcoin. And yeah, it only took me, I don't know, about 6 months to a year before I was, racking up the hundreds and thousand hours of research, and it wasn't long after that before I was like, I need to dedicate my life, my career to this. So that's when I kind of got my resume out there, found Galloway and everything else.
Nice. That's an awesome story. And I think that it's so like mind bending to think about how quickly 10 years can fly by. And then you realize like Bitcoin is still here. Like so many people thought that it would break. So many people thought that it would never reach the maturation that it has. And then you have people in the space such as yourself that continue to push the narrative that this is something that's here to stay and that you're going to continue to push and uplift communities using this protocol. And funny thing, right, Andrew? So I saw a clip of you somewhere on the Twitter world. You had a quarter and you called it dirty fiat, and you were putting it into this machine, and it kind of like spit out these satoshis. Was that in? Were you in El Salvador in that video?
Yep, I was at Adopting Bitcoin this past November. It's happening again this coming November, so get your tickets. And that machine is called a K1. It is a Salvadoran company. And they have a type that you can put bills in and a type you can put coins in. and it creates a LNURL withdrawal code that you can just receive sats to put in quarters and get out sats, right? And it's just beautiful because it's so simple, it's so fast, and they're using it a lot as like education too, right? Because in Bitcoin Beach, so just a real quick aside, the Blink wallet, which was originally called the Bitcoin Beach wallet, was designed in 2020 in El Zonte, in El Salvador, pre-Bitcoin law, alongside like the Hope House guys and merchants down there. And the wallet was designed for helping to build circular economies with Bitcoin. Well, one of the things that those guys did in the early days, so Jorge, I think it was, like got the first ATM ever in El Zonte. And it wasn't a fiat ATM. There was no fiat ATMs, but he got a Bitcoin ATM. And when you have an ATM and you can put in one type of money and get out real money, like or vice versa, I guess, it really goes a long way in showing people tangibly what Bitcoin is, right? And so people in like Bitcoin Beach in the early days, it's hard to grasp the concept of Bitcoin, especially if you live in a physical cash economy. And so something like that, like these BTMs or Bitcoin ATMs, are super critical in communities where you're onboarding people, right? And you're not onboarding them with like hundreds of hours of research. Rather, you're like, hey, download this wallet. I'm going to send you some sats. And like, you can go turn those sats into $1 and you can go buy the coffee, right? It makes it very tangible for them. So that, yeah, the K1, it's so cool to see the, Tianki is another one. These like companies, startups coming out of El Salvador, right? Like I'm super bullish on El Salvador. And yeah, if you haven't been to El Salvador and Bitcoin Beach, November is a great time to go for the Adopting Bitcoin conference.
Yes, that's definitely a pilgrimage that I need to make as a Bitcoiner. I've done the Bitcoin conference, that's like part one, and I think that the completion is definitely going to El Salvador. But Andrew, I definitely want to talk about Galoy, which is the company that you work for, and I think that Galoy is very unique in the sense that they're doing a lot of things and they're very immersed into El Salvador and just really kind of building this community of Bitcoiners that can really understand the protocol for the better. And Galoy has kind of been at the forefront of enabling these enterprises to leverage Bitcoin and Lightning for banking solutions. So, could you share some insights into how Galoy's open source banking infrastructure works and the potential it holds for transforming traditional financial systems?
For sure. Yeah, so a quick history. Our founder, Nicolas Berthet, was building Lightning, Lightning Wallet, and was thinking about Bitcoin banking, and thinking about the idea that Bitcoin is open source, right, and Lightning, and the fiat banking system is anything but, right. It's permissioned, it's closed. It's you need to have permission to and you're sending money through centralized Fed, Fed now in the future, but like ACH and FedWire and everything else. And having this idea that if Bitcoin is a better settlement layer for money, and Lightning is a better payments layer, well, Bitcoin and Lightning alone do not enable an organization or an enterprise to launch a product, right? There's a lot of work yet to be done. And so the idea of Galoy is to build a banking infrastructure to be able to plug into Bitcoin and Lightning in a way that's like where you can launch enterprise scale products without having the massive dedicated team to kind of like build from ground up. And so the Galoy stack has a GraphQL API, and then we have different modules. So actually, Nicolas, I'll shill like a video if anybody wants to go into depth, and I'll give a high level right here. But Nicolas was just at the MicroStrategy conference and presented the stack there, and kind of was presenting to like C-suite execs of Fortune 500 companies, on Lightning Day in Florida, about a few key concepts that enterprises need to be thinking about, which is one is custody. In the Galoy stack, it actually uses Spectre Wallet, so free and open source software for the win. You have a Bitcoin bridge to be able to interact between your enterprise applications and Bitcoin and Lightning. You need to have a ledger, right? A core ledger to maintain your liabilities, assets between multiple customers, different users, etc. And then the other piece that he talked about is volatility management, right? And so the short-term exchange rate volatility of Bitcoin is difficult to manage in certain contexts, right? One of those contexts is in a merchant in El Salvador that makes $30 in a day, and they can't have that $30 turn into 20 the next day, right? And so we built a open source project called StableSats, and it enables people to hold a dollar value stable inside of the Lightning wallet. So in the Blink wallet, users can receive to their Bitcoin account or to their StableSats account, and the money in that StableSats account will not go up with the price or exchange rate of Bitcoin, nor it will go down with the exchange rate of Bitcoin. And so, hugely valuable for a certain type of audience, which we can get into around the community sort of adoption and bottom up adoption context. But also the StableSats is a project that is one use case, right? There's also sort of enterprise level contexts for volatility management that it can be used. And actually, when the Silicon Valley Bank. It was funny. I was on the Kevin Roof's podcast like 2 days before Silicon Valley Bank like imploded, and he was like, "What about enterprise use cases for StableSats?" And I was like, "It's a good idea. Like we've been thinking more in like the bottom up and adoption. I haven't thought about it." And like 2 days later, I'm in a Twitter space, and the guy was like, "Yeah, we were doing this like inverse perpetual swap using derivatives to like to hold dollars in and out of Bitcoin." And I was like, oh well, there you go, there's some of your enterprise applications. So those are some of the core pieces, and when you put it all together, you have a really robust scalable infrastructure that is open source, that you can build and launch applications, Bitcoin applications on top of. And one of those is the Blink wallet, which is a preferred Lightning wallet for communities around the world to onboard and build circular economies with, which is really cool because it gives us a lot of insight on a day-to-day basis. I mean, the wallet's been live for 3+ years, and so yeah, it's built on the Galoy stack. And there's another one, so Bitcoin Jungle. I'm not sure if you've heard or you're familiar with, but there's a community in Costa Rica. They forked the wallet and launched it on the Galoy stack as well. And so, really, really bullish about the potential for building open source banking layer on top of Bitcoin and Lightning. Really, it's like the Linux, or thinking about open wins out, right? And so that's really what we're building towards and building for. So
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Anytime I hear about um, places and people that don't have the traditional access to banking, to generational wealth, a store of value, they're dealing with massive inflation. When I see these protocols, these different companies coming in and trying to kind of arbitrage people to actually become better using Bitcoin, that's always a win for me. But Andrew, there was something you said when you talked about the bottom up, and I kind of want you to expound on that a little bit more. So when you talk about the bottom up, are you really talking about the global south? Are you talking about underserved communities? Like, what is your net that you're casting at Galoy, like as far as the marketing world for your company? Like, what is the bottom up when you say that?
yeah. So when I say bottom up, I mean driven from the individual versus the government or the right. So I would say like in the very short term, and there's nuance which I'll gloss over, but like top down would be government says, hey, you can use Bitcoin, and therefore we launch products that people can use, etc. Bottom up is I don't know if you saw there's an image that I've been working on, which is like the circular economy Big Bang, which is in 2014 or 2013, you had Arnhem Bitcoinstad in Netherlands, which were like, hey, can we build a circular economy using Bitcoin, right? That was early, right? Pre-Lightning Network, not in the global south, right? So like bottom up does not mean global south per se, but I would say that the communities in the global south, they get Bitcoin faster than people elsewhere, right? And so, if I talk to friends, in the States, like they don't really have many of the problems, or they don't know that they have the problems that Bitcoin solves. And so they need to think more, they need to understand more, they need to understand money more. Whereas if you're thinking about somebody in Namibia, South Africa, Turkey, I guess would fall into this as well. You're Argentina, Guatemala. You're thinking about people who face on a day-to-day basis the shortcomings of the current fiat system, and they can go, oh my god, this is like, I mean, if you think about, like, listen to Chimbera from Bitcoin Beach, when he talks about the story of Bitcoin Beach, he talks about digital payments, right? Like, this is a physical cash based economy moving into digital payments for the first time. And so to me, bottom up is groups of people deciding that Bitcoin is a tool that we can use to improve our lives and our community, and we're gonna put that into action. And the graphic that I'm working on, that Herman from Bitcoin Akasi will be sharing at Bitcoin Prague in the booth, is like this big bang where you had like a couple of projects up until 2019. You had Bitcoin Beach, and now there's like 50, 60, 70 different projects where people are not just educating about Bitcoin as an asset, but building a circular economy, meaning people are earning Bitcoin for their wages, people are spending Bitcoin for their meals, and they are really sidestepping the fiat system a little bit in a way that can benefit the communities.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I really love that. And something so interesting, right? There was a Peter McCormick show, What Bitcoin Did. Michael Saylor was being interviewed about his life lessons, and there was something that he said that reminded me of you, which was he was talking about every generation, there's always this new technology, this new thing that comes along. And if you onboard or adopt this within the first 5 years, most people tend to be immortalized with that technology, right? And it makes me think of you as far as like marketing. When you talk about bottom up, the base is always the broadest, right? So when you're trying to market to people, when you're dealing with the bottom, you're always dealing with the most broad spectrum of individuals. And as the director of marketing for Galoy, how do you approach spreading this awareness and educating individuals and businesses about the potential of Bitcoin and Galoy solutions?
For sure. Yeah, there's really two angles to it, right? One of them is um, communicating the Galoy stack to sort of enterprise level builders, right? Like, the micro strategy. It was a perfect example of the audience of people who are going to be building on Bitcoin and Lightning in the coming years, right? Um, Now, the other side is uh, on like Blink or any other wallet, right? Blink is an open source wallet, right? So like a Bitcoin Jungle, right, is a fork of that, and there can be many more, right? So teams that want to build their own, we encourage that, right? And so the important thing there with having the broad base is, one thing I've been really excited about, thinking a lot about, is the community of communities, right? And so, as I mentioned, 60 different communities around the world, that are following in, I'll call it following in the footsteps of Bitcoin Beach. They all have their own flavor. Fernando in Bitcoin Beach, Brazil, has like POS systems with NFC, and he's using bulk cards to, give to sell sats, fruit for 10 sats every day into school kids, right? And like, beautiful project. And one of the things that I believe that we have a unique role and insight into is, in helping connect these communities with one another, because many of them are using Blink, a wallet built on Galoy, and Blink is a product that helps drive feedback and makes sure that we are developing at the forefront of Lightning. What are the solutions that people need? And so we have a Telegram chat called t.me/Bitcoin for communities. Um, a lot of the people that you see on different podcasts from around the world are in there. And we have Zoom calls and things like that to help spread information. I was just talking to somebody the other day from Tanzania, who said, I'm working on building a school. Do you have any input? And so we're going to have a Zoom call to bring together like people from different projects, right? And so I think, like, marketing is a term that can cover like many aspects, but I think for the purposes of myself, it is really like, coordinating or collaborating with the community that we serve, or the communities that we serve. So, and bringing together as well. So the sort of the enterprise level that is going to be, needing to build on the Galoy stack, and then at the end user level, like you said, the broad base of like people who are adopting Lightning as money, right? Because that's where we believe we're all going, right? Like we exist because we believe Bitcoin benefits every human on the planet. We're building solutions that we hope will get Bitcoin into every human on the planet's hands. And we're doing this together, right? So like maybe lastly, in terms of like the marketing angle of it is we are developing things that we hope are useful for others to use and replicate. And so we've got a GitHub repository of like all of this stuff, like these onboarding resources and merchant guides and customer guides. And my newest favorite thing is we've got some T-shirts that say "Puedo pagar con Bitcoin" and "Pagame con Bitcoin," two different T-shirts that say either "Can I pay in Bitcoin" or "Pay me in Bitcoin." And so like we are marketing Bitcoin, right? We are competing against fiat, and so it's a really fun place to be and a rewarding place to be.
Yes, I agree with that. And, the world is full of problems, and there's this cycle of people just kind of complaining about them. But the best thing that we can do is create solutions. And I saw someone say that, podcasts don't really build anything in the Bitcoin ecosystem, but I tend to disagree because when I have conversations with individuals such as yourself, it's all about marketing and it's all about talking about new ideas because the conversations we're having might spark the interest of some new builder or engineer to build something new and innovative that no one thought about before. So I think that podcasting is like the best form of free marketing you could have for Bitcoin. So, I want to thank you, Andrew, for, really breaking down Galoy's marketing strategy because you as a director you're kind of at the helm of how the brand is going to be pushed, how people are going to kind of onboard into the company. So I think that your insight and your understanding of how Bitcoin is going to actually change the world has been super beneficial for you in that role.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that um, yeah, there's the Bitcoin space is spicy these days as people casting all sorts of claims around, but the Twitter Spaces and podcasts. I mean, these are ways that information spreads, right? And that conversations happen. I think it's incredibly important. I think that um, more Bitcoiners are coming into the space faster because of the information that people like yourself are making available and easy to consume. And so, yeah, it's yeah, again, a pleasure to chat with you about it.
Yes, most definitely. And last question for you, Andrew. So, following the success of Bitcoin Beach, Galoy is now helping all these other communities around the world create these similar circular economies. What are some of the key considerations and challenges when implementing these new incentives in new locations like Bitcoin Jungle? There's all these different places. I talked to Bobo Dread, he's doing something in Jamaica. So you're seeing all these different things popping up. So what impact do you anticipate these projects having on local economies?
Sure. Yeah. It's funny. The first thing I did when I joined Galoy, this was leading into the first Adopting Bitcoin conference in 2021, was to write a article, pretty long form, like 5,000 words or so, called "Bitcoin Banking for Communities: Lessons Learned from Zonte." And so, um, anything I skip here can be found there. It's on Galoy.io, and a couple things like maybe that stuck out to me, the lessons wise. First of all, the communities, like the connection between the physical community and the cyberspace community. So Gigi talks about, right, like the communities in cyberspace, right, Einundzwanzig and the many other communities, and a lot of these Bitcoin circular economies start as meet space, right? Like a few individuals, right? Now, I think that I'm really excited about the connection between them, right? Because we as Bitcoiners, whether we're on Twitter or Nostr or otherwise, like we want to see communities succeed and grow. And we're here to help, right? We're here to offer, whether it's stats, whether it's information. And so for people that are trying to build a community in the footsteps of Bitcoin Beach, I think being present in the ethos and the conversation of Bitcoiners is super important. Because and a good example that I like to give is Bitcoin Lake in Guatemala. every time that they would onboard a merchant, or not every time, but they would say, "Hey, we got a new pizza place who has decided to accept Bitcoin. Um, Now we're going to have a pizza party there next Wednesday. Can you guys help us fund this pizza party?" And they need like $50 from like all the Bitcoiners in the world, right? And so they fund their pizza party. But the most important thing is the merchant that they have onboarded has now had a great experience, because one of the difficult things, and maybe one of the toughest things that I kind of am observing, is the chicken and the egg of like onboarding merchants and onboarding like individuals who will spend Bitcoin. All right. Because if you onboard 15 merchants and nobody goes and spends Bitcoin there, they don't just have like a neutral experience with Bitcoin, they have a negative experience, right? Because they've gone out on a limb, they're trying something new, that's they're giving away like actual products and services, right, for this thing that they're maybe unsure of, and nobody's even asking for it. And so the like the throttling of like, hey, let's onboard 2 merchants in our community and let's all go support that merchant, right? Is, I think, incredibly big. And I think Bitcoin Ikasi in South Africa has done just an amazing job with this, because they like were deliberately growing at this methodical pace. And I think it was like a couple months ago where they just had their first like inbound lead, so to speak. Somebody coming to them saying, "Hey, I want to accept Bitcoin. Can you help me?" Right. Whereas before they were like out there like pushing and marketing, right? And they've created this groundswell. And so I think that that matters, is having like that community, keeping it tight knit, kind of growing at a methodical pace. Um, and then I mentioned the thing about the ATM. I think that was incredibly like, I don't know, an interesting insight to say that like if you have an ATM in your community, it makes it tangible for people that are used to physical cash otherwise. So yeah, those are some of the main things I would say. One other thing too is like, how do you tap into an existing community that is not Bitcoin, that has some established trust in the community? And so in Bitcoin Beach, it was Hope House. In Bitcoin Lake, it's this school called Centro Educativo Josue. In Praia in Brazil, you actually had Fernando was working for a while on adoption, but then he was connecting with the local school that had a broken down computer lab. It had not been used in a couple of years, and he raised money and bought like replacement parts, and he brought a computer lab back online. And next thing you know, he's developing this relationship with like the local town, the schools, the kids, and everything. And it's like, like bam, like your community can really like catch on like fire, because there's already a connection between people who are learning together, rather than like you trying to be out there by yourself, like knocking on doors.
Exactly. And I love that because that's really what it's about. And a lot of people can kind of get lost in the transition of Bitcoin and price go up and what's happening next or what's the next latest drama in the space. And I always get humbled when I talk to people like you, Andrew, because it goes back down to community. It goes back down to creating these solutions and really helping people in need because, we're kind of blessed in the first world, even though we have our own problems. We could not imagine what people in the third world countries are going through. And Bitcoin is allowing these people to really have a leg up in society, which they've never had because they've had bad government, they've had massive inflation, they've had infrastructure issues, political issues, civil wars, the whole, kit and caboodle. So Bitcoin is always a good thing. When I see people like you helping, it makes me feel better as a podcaster, as a content creator in this space. So, Andrew, before we go, can you give people your social media handles, anything you want to push, your meetups, let people know what you're doing before you go?
Sure. I can be found AGBEGIN, so AG begin, basically anywhere. Galoy is galoy.io, or on GitHub is Galoy Money. Twitter is Galoy Money. Everything's typically Galoy Money for social. And the Blink wallet is Blink BTC on Twitter and Instagram. Or we're actually changing the Instagram to that soon. But if you want to download Blink Wallet, sorry, it's not available in the US, but blink.sv is the place to go to get the links to download that. Adopting Bitcoin. So I've got my throwback Adopting Bitcoin shirt. Get down there November 7th the 9th, I believe it is. And then yeah, lastly, Rhode Island Bitcoiners, first Wednesday of every month. You can find us on Meetup or RI Bitcoiners on Twitter. So thanks again. It's been fun chat, and yeah, thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Andrew. Once again, thank you for being on the Bitcoin Source, a Bitcoin conversation. Have a good one, brother.
Thank you.